What's up, folks? Welcome back to InvestStream. I'm Pankaj, and today we're going to talk about dilution. Dilution is something that a lot of founders don't pay too much attention to when they're raising their early rounds, and it can cause some problems later on. So we're going to jump into it right after this. All right, welcome back, folks. Dilution. I'll go into a brief description real quick. Dilution is essentially how much equity you have in a company and how much does that equity get reduced by because you're issuing new shares and you're bringing on new investors or owners in the company, right? So over time, the more money you raise, even if the valuation gets higher and higher, you are decreasing your stake in the company. So that's fine. That's normal. That happens. There are multi-billion-dollar companies where the founders might own just a few percent of the company when it IPOs or gets acquired or whatever, and that's normal because people are taking the risk by providing you with lots of capital to kind of get the company where it needs to be. However, the thing that a lot of founders don't really hear about or talk to a lot of folks about early on when they're trying to raise money is how much dilution is okay. There's really no right or wrong answer. However, if you are raising money, my general suggestion is try to keep at least 50% between the founders by the time you close your Series A. Now, it doesn't have to be exactly 50%, it doesn't have to be 54%, it doesn't have to be 45%, but somewhere around that range of 50%. That's a great thing. If you can get to your Series A, close it, and still own 50% between your co-founders, you're good to go. Unfortunately, a lot of founders don't start with a high dilution number and then work their way backwards to figure out how much dilution is okay for the current round that they're raising. And that's where they run into problems. So generally what I tell founders is you're probably going to raise two for sure, maybe three rounds of funding before you get to a Series A. In a Series A in the US, you'll probably give up somewhere around 20 to 25%. In other international markets, it might be 30%. In some less liquid markets, it might even be higher than that. So now, coming back to how to work this backwards, my example is primarily for US-based startups, but a lot of other markets like India, Southeast Asia would also apply. So assume you're giving up about 20-25% of your company in your Series A. So you should probably be at about 60% ownership before you start raising your Series A, right? And assume that you're giving up at least 10% for your option pool. 15% to 20% is also possible, but probably not likely. I think 10 to 12%, maybe 15% on the high end, pre-Series A option pool is probably adequate. So now you're at 75% if you talk about the option pool at 15%. So 60% coming into your Series A, 15% option pool already created, and then you probably have about 25% or so dilution that you should probably take between your first 2 to 3 rounds, right? Now it could be a little bit higher, a little bit lower. Don't go exactly by that number, but your first round, if you're raising a pre-seed, angel round, whatever you want to call it, of under $500,000, you probably want to dilute no more than about 10 to 12%. That's kind of on the high end. After you raise that, and there's another thing you got to keep in mind. A lot of early investors will have something in the SAFE agreement or the convertible note that says their equity is non-dilutive until a Series A, right? So you have to assume that if you give up 10% in that pre-seed round, that 10% is going to stay at 10% until the Series A closes, right? So you want to make sure that you understand what the agreement that you're signing says. So what kind of dilution are you actually going to wind up taking? Right now, the second round, most people will do a seed in the U.S. Let's say $1.5 million or something at the seed stage. So if you're doing a seed of about $1.5 million, you're probably looking at somewhere around another 10 to 15% dilution. I would say 15% is probably more likely than 10%. So keep that in mind. Again, that's probably going to be non-dilutive until the Series A. Now, some companies are going to need to wind up raising some sort of bridge round or pre-Series A round in order to get them over that hump to the Series A. Now, the amount could range a bit, but Pair VC put out a report recently that kind of mapped out all these the various rounds and what they're called and what the ranges are. So I'll add that in the show notes below. But assume that you'll give up like another 10% or so in that pre-Series A bridge round of sorts. So now you're looking at somewhere around 30-35% dilution, plus your option pool. Now you're going into your Series A where you'll probably give up another 20 to 25%. So, the numbers don't always add up exactly the way you want, but as a founder, you want to make sure that you own as much of your company for as long as possible, right? And that's really what we're trying to talk about here, is trying to maximize what you're doing with the money that you're raising while also minimizing the amount of dilution that you're taking, and working with investors that will be happy to work with you and figure out dilution and things like that in the event that you get over diluted. The reason that downstream investors, Series A, Series B investors, think about not investing is because they're not sure how long a founder is going to be incentivized to stick around. That's one reason why it makes it really hard to raise a Series A after you've diluted too much. If you thought this was helpful, please give the video a thumbs up. Please leave a comment. Please, if you're a founder who has raised some money, throw in a comment about how much dilution you've taken between your first round of financing all the way through your Series A. What other challenges that you faced? Please ask some questions.